Thomas and Julia Granger were the couple everyone envied. Successful, loving, and endlessly admired in their quiet suburban town. But when a woman named Vanessa Cole vanished without a trace, the truth began to surface. Thomas wasn't just a devoted husband and father. He was also a man living a lie so elaborate it ended in murder. In the peaceful suburb of Westbridge, life moved at a calm and predictable pace. Neighbors greeted each other with friendly waves, lawns were neatly trimmed, and weekends were filled with family barbecues and soccer games. Among the many families who called this place home, the Grangers stood out. Thomas Granger in particular was often spoken of in admiring tones. He was tall, always neatly dressed, and carried himself with quiet confidence. A successful architect, Thomas had designed several of the modern homes in the area, including his own. A sleek, glass-fronted house that always looked like it had just been photographed for a magazine. To his neighbors, Thomas was the kind of man who made everything seem effortless. He was the first to shovel snow off the sidewalk in winter, and the first to volunteer when the local school needed new playground equipment. He attended every school play, cheered loudly at soccer matches, and always seemed to know exactly what to say to put people at ease. He brought his wife, Julia, coffee in bed every morning and posted sweet anniversary messages on social media, usually accompanied by perfectly filtered family photos. Together with their two children, Emma, age 10, and Oliver, 7, they appeared to live an idyllic life. Julia, a high school teacher, often spoke proudly of her husband's work. She described late nights when he stayed up planning a new community center, or the weekends he spent sketching ideas for a local church renovation. Their children thrived, both excelling in school and loved by their teachers. The Grangers hosted holiday dinners, neighborhood game nights, and pool parties in the summer. Their home was filled with laughter, light, and the smell of home-cooked meals. Even their dog, a golden retriever named Milo, seemed too good to be true. But behind the perfection was something else, something no one could see. There were moments, small ones at first, that went unnoticed, like the business trips that didn't quite match the locations listed on his work calendar, or the calls Thomas would take in the garage, always lowering his voice as soon as anyone got close. He claimed they were about zoning issues or city permits. Julia never questioned him. After all, he had never given her a reason to doubt him. Not until much later. Thomas knew how to blend in. He kept his schedules tight and his explanations tighter. He made sure to be home for dinner, to tuck his kids in at night, to leave sticky notes on the fridge with hearts and smiley faces drawn in blue ink. He lived by a simple rule: never create waves, and for years it worked. No one suspected a thing. Not his family, not his colleagues, not his friends. In a town where nothing bad ever seemed to happen, Thomas Granger was the last person anyone would expect to hide a secret. But what no one realized was that behind the carefully crafted smiles and the perfectly organized life was a man living two very different stories, and one of them was about to unravel. The quiet rhythm of Westbridge was interrupted on a rainy Tuesday morning when news of a missing woman began to spread. Her name was Vanessa Cole, a 32-year-old marketing consultant from the nearby city of Fairhaven. She had failed to show up for a crucial meeting, and when her calls went unanswered, her sister reported her missing. At first, it seemed like another case of a young professional under stress. Perhaps she needed a break or had left town for a few days. But that theory didn't hold up for long. Vanessa's phone was found turned off, her apartment undisturbed, and her bank accounts untouched. Something was wrong. A few days later, police discovered her car parked on the side of a rural road near the edge of Westbridge. It wasn't a place Vanessa was known to visit. The car was locked. Her purse was inside. The driver's seat was adjusted for someone taller than her. It didn't make sense. The car had been parked near a wooded trail that led to a small, quiet park. Locals often walked their dogs there, but no one recalled seeing Vanessa. The last digital trace she left behind was a credit card transaction from a local diner just 2 days before she vanished. When detectives retrieved surveillance footage from the diner, they saw Vanessa sitting across from a man. Their faces were turned slightly away from the camera, and the image was grainy, distorted by overhead lights. But certain details stood out. The man was tall, well-dressed, with dark hair and broad shoulders. He leaned in while talking, smiling, his hand occasionally reaching across the table. The conversation looked intimate. The man never removed his cap, and his back was mostly to the camera, but the restaurant staff remembered him clearly. A sketch was released to the public based on the description provided by the diner's waiter. It didn't take long before whispers began in Westbridge. Several people thought the man looked eerily similar to someone they knew. One neighbor, reluctant at first, told police that the drawing resembled Thomas Granger. It seemed far-fetched. Thomas, the community-minded architect with the perfect family. But the more people looked, the harder it became to ignore the resemblance. His wife, Julia, was reportedly out of town visiting her sister that weekend. The same weekend the diner receipt was dated. When approached by investigators, Thomas denied knowing anyone named Vanessa Cole. He claimed to have been home with the kids that weekend, watching movies and ordering takeout. There was no immediate reason to doubt him. But something felt off. The coincidence was too big to ignore, and there were still too many unanswered questions. Why had Vanessa's car been found so close to his neighborhood? Why had no one seen her after that dinner? As suspicions grew, police began to dig deeper into Vanessa's life, searching for connections. What they would eventually uncover would challenge everything people thought they knew, not just about the case, but about the man at the center of it. The investigation into Vanessa Cole's disappearance gained momentum as detectives focused on piecing together her final days. Her digital footprint became a map of hidden routines and undisclosed locations. Among her emails and calendar entries was a recurring address in downtown Fairhaven, a modest apartment in an older red brick building tucked between a bakery and a tailor shop. It wasn't listed in her name, and none of her friends or family had ever been there. Surveillance cameras inside the building revealed something startling. A man, matching Thomas Granger's build and appearance, was seen entering and exiting the apartment regularly, always alone, sometimes wearing sunglasses or a cap pulled low. The timestamps on the footage aligned with weekends when Thomas had claimed to be working or traveling for business. Detectives obtained a warrant and entered the apartment. Inside, they found signs of a lived-in space, a toothbrush by the sink, 2 coffee mugs in the drying rack, a neatly made bed, and clothing in both male and female sizes. Framed photographs on the dresser showed Vanessa smiling beside a man who looked just like Thomas, though he appeared slightly different. No wedding ring, a different hairstyle, and casual clothes, unlike his usual polished appearance. In those images, he was someone else entirely. The name Eric Monroe appeared on mail and lease documents, along with a driver's license that used Thomas's face but a completely false identity. Further investigation revealed that Thomas had created a full alias, complete with a fake background, job history, and social media accounts. Vanessa had been in a relationship with Eric for over 2 years, believing him to be a divorced consultant who traveled frequently for work. Her texts and emails to him were loving, full of future plans and travel ideas. There was no indication that she knew he was living a double life. What shocked investigators most was how meticulously Thomas had kept the 2 lives separate. None of the photos or messages crossed into his family life. The apartment was paid for through a separate account set up under the alias. Even the phone number Vanessa had for Eric was registered with a prepaid, untraceable mobile service. The level of planning suggested not only deception, but long-term intent. This wasn't an affair. It was an alternate identity, carefully built and maintained. When confronted with the findings, Thomas maintained his innocence. He admitted to the affair, saying Vanessa had grown obsessive and unstable, and that he had ended things weeks before she disappeared. He claimed not to know anything about her whereabouts after that, but his statements didn't match the evidence. A recently deleted photo was recovered from Vanessa's cloud storage, showing the 2 of them together at the downtown apartment just a few days before she vanished. Vanessa had even noted in a digital diary that Eric was acting strange, distant, and secretive, talking less and avoiding future plans. The walls around Thomas's carefully curated life were beginning to collapse. The perfect husband, the trusted architect, the dependable neighbor, none of those titles could explain the secret life he had lived, or why the woman he had built it with had ended up dead. Spring brought new warmth to Westbridge, but with it came a discovery that would break the case wide open. Nearly 6 months after Vanessa Cole's disappearance, a local hiker exploring a remote trail near Lake Winford stumbled across something unexpected. Just off the path, beneath a thick covering of leaves and earth, the hiker noticed what appeared to be fabric protruding from the ground. The smell was faint but unmistakable. Authorities were called immediately, and by nightfall a crime scene had been established. Buried in a shallow grave was the body of a woman later confirmed to be Vanessa Cole. Her remains were partially decomposed, but dental records matched, and fragments of clothing aligned with what she had last been seen wearing. The area was remote and rarely visited, chosen carefully. Investigators noted that whoever buried her had attempted to conceal the site with natural debris, but not expertly. There were signs of haste. Nearby, buried deeper in the soil, was a small silver necklace with the initials EM. Engraved on the back, Eric Monroe, the alias Thomas Granger had used. An autopsy revealed that Vanessa had died from blunt force trauma to the head. There were no defensive wounds, suggesting she may have been taken by surprise. The medical examiner estimated her death occurred within days of her last known contact, aligning closely with the date she had last been seen with Eric at the diner in Westbridge. Though the body was badly degraded, forensic experts were able to collect enough evidence to help narrow down time and place. The grave's location was crucial. It wasn't just some random remote area, it was within a few miles of a lake house that Thomas had once designed for a client. Property records showed he had visited the site several times, and blueprints with his signature were found in archived files. Search warrants were issued for Thomas's home, office, and vehicle. What they uncovered was damning. In the trunk of his SUV, investigators found traces of the same soil and plant life from the burial site. Deep in the car's search history logs, forensic software recovered deleted web queries, questions about body decomposition, burial depths, and untraceable poisons. Investigators also found online orders for industrial-grade gloves and cleaning chemicals shipped to a P.O. box in Fairhaven under the name Eric Monroe. Perhaps the most chilling discovery was a series of photos on a memory card retrieved from Vanessa's cloud storage. In one taken just weeks before her death, Thomas, disguised as Eric, was standing outside the lake house. He appeared unaware of the camera. The timestamp placed him there shortly before Vanessa stopped responding. 2 calls and messages. She had likely taken the photo secretly, possibly beginning to suspect something wasn't right. With all the evidence finally coming together, Vanessa's body, the burial location, the necklace, the search history, and the photo, the case against Thomas Granger moved from suspicion to certainty. His carefully constructed world had begun to crumble, piece by piece. The perfect husband was no longer untouchable. He was now the prime suspect in a calculated and deeply disturbing crime. The trial of Thomas Granger became the most talked-about event in Westbridge's history. Journalists filled the courtroom each day, and news vans lined the streets outside the courthouse. Residents who had once called him a friend, a mentor, or a role model now watched in disbelief as he sat silently at the defendant's table. Gone was the polished architect and devoted father. In his place sat a man stripped of charm and credibility, facing charges of first-degree murder, fraud, and obstruction of justice. His wife, Julia, never returned to the courtroom after the first day. The prosecution laid out the evidence methodically. They began with Thomas's double life, showing the jury photographs, lease agreements, and witness statements that detailed his relationship with Vanessa Cole under the false identity of Eric Monroe. They highlighted the calculated way he separated this identity from his family, using fake documents and burner phones to keep the lives apart. Next came the forensic evidence, the soil from the burial site found in his SUV, the internet searches about decomposition, and the purchases made under his alias. One by one, each piece connected him to Vanessa's death. Her silver necklace, with the engraved initials, the photos from her cloud account, and the timeline of his movements during the days leading up to her disappearance all pointed in a single direction. Vanessa had trusted him. She believed he was a man with a future to offer, But when her questions became inconvenient, when she pushed for a meeting with his children, when she spoke of marriage, he saw her not as a partner, but as a threat. That threat had to be removed. The defense tried to paint Vanessa as unstable and obsessed. They argued there was no direct evidence placing Thomas at the scene of the crime at the time of her death. But the jury was unmoved. The weight of circumstantial evidence was overwhelming. The planning, the lies, the location of the body, and Thomas's increasing paranoia as Vanessa got closer to the truth painted a chilling portrait of premeditation. After just 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a unanimous verdict: guilty on all counts. Thomas Granger was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He showed no emotion as the sentence was read. In the months that followed, Julia Granger quietly filed for divorce. She changed her name and relocated with her children to another state, far from the whispers and stares of Westbridge. She refused all interview requests and removed every trace of her former husband from social media. The life they had once built brick by brick was gone. The town of Westbridge struggled to come to terms with the truth. How had no one seen it? How had a man who smiled at school concerts and coached youth soccer been capable of such darkness? Behind the perfect facade was a man who had deceived everyone. His story served as a haunting reminder that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who seem the most ordinary.